Books on Tape presents The Cruelest Miles, the heroic story of dogs and men in a race against an epidemic. Written by Gay Salisbury and Laney Salisbury. Read by Barrett Whitener. He who gives time to the study of the history of Alaska learns that the dog, next to man, has been the most important factor in its past and present development. Alaska Judge James Wickersham, 1903. There was no line of retreat, no going back and covering the same ground twice. Fridtjof Nansen, on naming his expedition from to mean forward. Well, all I know about dogs is not much, but when I was up in Alaska, their whole existence tangles around dogs. The backbone of the Arctic is a dog's backbone. Will Rogers's last column, recovered from the wreck of his fatal plane crash in Alaska, August 1935. Prologue. Icebound. All by ourselves. The last boat is gone, and we are, to use the homely phrase, alone with ourselves. Nome Nugget. Curtis Welch was the only doctor for hundreds of miles along this forgotten edge of the Bering Sea, and for the past 18 years he had watched winter descend suddenly, as it tends to do up in the far north. There were just 2 seasons here, they said, winter and the 4th of July. Winters were at least 7 months long in Nome, and the other seasons came and went within a few short weeks. From July to October, the Bering Sea was free of ice, and the town was open to steamboats and schooners that sailed in from Seattle, the closest major port, about 2,400 miles and 14 days away to the south. By early November, the Bering Sea would be frozen over and the light nearly drained from the sky. The Victoria, usually the first passenger ship to arrive in spring and the last to leave in the fall, would have unloaded its cargo and headed south, leaving the town cut off from the world save for one route, a dog sled trail that linked the town with the interior of Alaska. The unrelenting cold came on suddenly and violently, with blizzards that lasted for days and brought about an extreme isolation that could sap the determination of the hardiest soul. Each fall, nearly half the town's population left to board the last ships of the season and stayed away until spring. And yet, Welch stayed behind. He had done so each year, except once when he left on a short stint to work as a stateside doctor during the Great War. Welch had fallen for Alaska from the moment he arrived in 1907, and his fondness had grown over the years. He had once written to his sister back home in New Haven, Connecticut, that the big country provided plenty of room for him to stretch his soul. From the time Welch was a young boy, he had felt a distinct sense of otherness, and while he still found even the smallest social gesture a task, he was known to leave a dinner party when the conversation was just getting going. The boundless Alaskan space was heaven-sent. He had found himself at last, he wrote. He was 50 now, the golden blonde hair white, standing up in shocks. He looked forward to the town's annual exodus and to his solitude. At any time of year, Nome was a distant place, a speck on the map of America's last frontier, that vast territory of Alaska stretching out over nearly 600,000 square miles, an area as big as England, France, Italy, and Spain combined. At one end, in the southeast, were the capital, Juneau, and the territory's year-round ice-free ports. At the other end, to the northwest, was Nome. In all its quadrants, Alaska defied exaggeration. To the west, active volcanoes spewed smoke over a rugged North Pacific coast, and to the east, glaciers the size of Rhode Island hovered over fjords. In the interior, the heart of the territory, North America's tallest peak, Mount McKinley, reached up through the clouds over an endless expanse of timber. A traveler in the early 1900s said that one would have to spend a lifetime in Alaska to fully understand it, to catch the seasons change over 4 climatic zones, or to smell the sweet cold air as it hustled across the frozen sea. And perhaps by the end of that lifetime, one would finally reach Nome. In the early 1920s, Nome was the northwesternmost city in North America, a former gold rush boomtown that had lost its glitter years before. It sat 2 degrees south of the Arctic Circle on the southern shore of the Seward Peninsula, a windswept fist of land that jutted 200 miles out into the Bering Sea. It was closer to Siberia than to any other major town in Alaska, and a little further north, on a rare, clear day in this foggy, storm-ridden world, one could see across the Bering Straits to Russia 55 miles away. The international date line was a few miles off the westernmost tip of the peninsula, and one could literally see tomorrow. From the second floor of his modest corner apartment above the Miners and Merchants Bank on Front Street, Welch and his wife Lula had a front-row seat to the town's elaborate winter preparations. The Victoria was gone, and the last ship of the fallen season of 1924, the Alameda, sailed in with the town's winter supplies. It sat heavy in the water a mile and a half off the coast at the roadstead, as near as a ship could get to shore without running aground. Nome had neither dock nor safe harbor, and the lighters and launches had to maneuver through the surf and out to the great ship before turning back to shore with their precious cargo. On Front Street, which ran parallel to the sea, gangs of Eskimo longshoremen unloaded the cargo, which they stacked up along the waterfront and readied for storage. There were boxes of dried fruit and frozen turkeys, mountains of coal, and crates filled with butter and tea. The work went on all day and into the night. Horse carriages and wheelbarrows moved down Front Street to the hulking wooden warehouses along the shore of the Snake River on the west side of town. There was room enough to store supplies for Nome's 1,400-odd residents, as well as for many of the 10,000 other Alaskans living in scattered villages and small mining camps of the Seward Peninsula and beyond. The town had become the region's commercial hub, and many Alaskans traveled here through the winter to buy everything from hardware to curtains and coal. If they took ill, they ended up in the care of Welch and his 4 nurses at Maynard Columbus Hospital, which had 25 beds and was considered the best-equipped medical institution in northwestern Alaska. Front Street was never busier than in the days before the last ship sailed out. Its wooden planks creaked and its sidewalks sagged from the human traffic headed down to the waterfront. Eggs were stored in vats of brine, and turkeys were laid out in cold caches built behind every home, and if the missus ran out of storage space, she could always walk down to Front Street and make a last-minute deal for a little extra room in one of the trading posts. Children came home from the tundra with buckets filled with the last of the season's wild berries. These would be turned into preserves, or better still, into cordials, which were technically illegal since prohibition was the law of the land. Miners who had spent the summer prospecting in the hills beyond Nome returned in knee-high rubber boots and woolen breeches and waited in the hotels and coffee shops to ship out. Those who stayed behind traded in their boots for warm, waterproof native footwear called mukluks. The U.S. Marshal was known to hand out government-issued blue tickets, which were exit visas for the insane, the destitute, and the criminally inclined. Dallying was firmly discouraged, for the Alameda was the only way out, and the captain could hardly risk being trapped in for the winter. The ice was the final arbiter. There was no higher authority. Nome's permanent Eskimo population lived a mile and a half west of town on a sandbar across the mouth of the Snake River called the Sand Spit, and they readied for winter as they had for centuries. Those without jobs as laborers in Nome traveled down the Bering coast with their nets to fish for a last batch of salmon or char, and the women would go to work with their curved steel knives or ulus and hang the fish up on drying racks to cure in the cold sea air. If they came upon a seal on one of their frequent trips up north, they would shoot it, load it onto their wide, skin-covered boats, umiaks, and after a rough ride over the waves, bring it home. There it would be skinned to make
Sample complete. Ready to continue?